All right, welcome back. We have 3 more videos. It literally just occurred to me now as I pressed stop on that last video. Like, this is the last week of presentations, which means I'm giving a lecture next week, but I try to stay a week ahead, which means I've got to record a lecture real soon now. So I'm going to get this video edited and record another lecture. But yeah, enjoy these last 3 presentations, and I'll say goodnight afterwards.
Hello everyone, this is Group 8, and we will be presenting Larvell. So what is Larvell? Larvell is an open source full-stack PHP framework which was developed in 2011 by Taylor Otwell. It lets a user build custom web-based and mobile applications. The premise of Larvell is providing an enjoyable and fulfilling development experience. Larvell provides clear application structure and simplifies the most tedious development tasks, such as authentication, routing, session control. Moreover, it does so without sacrificing functionality. Larvell is very scalable due to the nature of PHP. Its applications have reportedly been scaled to handle hundreds of millions of requests per month. The stack. Larvell is intended to be used as a full-stack framework, allowing to route requests to the web applications and render the responses with a front-end application, such as Larvell Blade templates or any other. Also, Larvell can be used to build a custom backend REST API for a JavaScript application, providing authentication, data access, and other development services. The ecosystem. Larvell's functionality can be expanded further by using certain integrations within its ecosystem. There are some examples of Larvell native services. They cover administration, application infrastructure, server management, and even powering microservice architecture. In addition to core ecosystem features, there is an abundant choice of partner-provided modules and integrations on Larvell.io. Offerings cover a wide range of categories, for example, analytics, cloud services, debugging, customer relationship management, messaging, and server management, and many more. All new integration components are supervised and verified by the team, which ensures relative safety of third-party integrations. So who uses Larvell? As of 2021, there are around 720,000 websites utilizing Larvell framework. Some of the most notable ones include 9gag, Weibo, and October CMS. There is a strong and growing community of Larvell users, enthusiasts, and professionals alike. Issues can be addressed on GitHub, Twitter, or a Larvell.io community forum. Moreover, Larvell's team is actively present in the media with its own podcast, networking events, tutorials, and webinars. Larvell's GitHub page indicates that the framework was or is used by almost 1 million people with 2,600 active contributors to the main framework repository.
Design pattern, MVC. Laravel has an architectural design pattern called MVC, which stands for Model View Controller. In MVC, the model represents the objects, the view represents the user interface, and the controller is responsible for the logic between them. What are the benefits of MVC? Well, first, in MVC, assigning roles becomes really easy because the project is separated into these 3 components. The front-end developer can work on the views while the back-end does the controller and model. Second, this makes it easier to test and isolate work because there will be no dependencies between the model and views. Third, Laravel's MVC also forces you to organize your files into many logical folders, making them easier to find, especially in large projects. Models, controllers, and views. In Laravel, the syntax of writing models, views, and controllers is also very convenient. Models are typically class structures that interact with data storage, and they can be created simply with one command in the terminal shown here. Shown below it, controllers can also be declared with a single line of code. In the routes folder, a file named web.php can be configured to direct where each URL is mapped to. For instance, it can be configured by mapping URLs to a controller with this one line, or they can be mapped to a view with this other line below it. Finally, views in Laravel are typically HTML data stored in blade.php files that are in a folder named resources/views. They are usually what is served to the user and what the user sees and interacts with. You can see where they are located in the picture on the right. Blade is a unique tool in Larvell, especially designed for building these views, as you will see in a moment. Features Blade templates. Blade is a simple and convenient PHP templating engine in Larvell. Files with a blade.php extension are Blade templates. These are compiled into a normal PHP file. Then the PHP file is what gets served as the view. Thus, the Blade has zero overhead, and you are given the freedom to use Blade shortcuts or vanilla PHP at the same time. Blade allows you to conveniently display data in a clean and concise way, making your code easier to write and increasing its readability. There are plenty of ways Blade templates achieve this. For example, parameters and variables can be echoed by surrounding them with curly braces. In the example shown here, the PHP can be replaced by the Blade version in this one line. Variables displayed in these curly braces also are automatically escaped due to preventing XSS attacks unless you put exclamation marks around them. Blade directives. Larval Blade directives further provide uses and shorthands when writing a Blade template. Blade provides readily used directives such as @JSON that would provide a replacement for functions such as JSON encode. Here is an example of how this line in PHP can be replaced in Blade. Some directives have their own original functionality, such as @include. This directive allows you to include variables from this current view to another specified Blade view. There are many Blade directives, and one can safely assume any commonly used PHP operation has its own Blade counterpart. For example, there are Blade directives for conditions and loops. You can find more of these directives listed and documented in the Larvell website. Thus, Blade templates are easy to learn, to use, and come with many functionalities that will save you valuable time and effort as you build your views.
Artisan. Artisan is the command line interface included within Larval. Larval frameworks provide the built-in tool for a command line known as Artisan that performs the repetitive programming tasks that do not allow the PHP developers to perform manually. These artisans can also be used to create the skeleton code, database structure, and their migration. So it makes it easy to manage the database of the system. It also generates the MVC files through the command line. Artisan also allows the developers to create their own commands. Artisan exists at the root of the application as the Artisan script and provides a number of helpful commands that assist users while they build their application. To view a list of all available Artisan commands, user can use the list command. PHP Artisan list. Every command also includes a help screen, which displays and describes the command's available arguments and options. To view a help screen, precede the name of the command with help. Here's an example: PHP Artisan help migrate. Eloquent. Eloquent is an ORM, which is short for Object Relational Mapper. It is included by default within the Larvell framework. An ORM is a software that facilitates handling database records by representing data as objects, working as a layer of abstraction on the top of this database engine used to store an application's data. Eloquent facilitates the task of interacting with database tables, providing an object-oriented approach to inserting, updating, and deleting database records, while also providing a Steam-linked interface for executing complex SQL queries. An effective ORM allows the developers to query the database tables by using the simple PHP syntax without using any SQL codes. It provides easy integration between the developers and the database tables by giving each of the table with their corresponding models.
Okay, I'll demonstrate you how Larvell works. First off, we need to set up a folder for Larvell with Larvell structure. This is how we set up the folder structure. As long as you have the dependencies that are needed for Larvell. Let's say you are missing Larvell UI, so you would do composer require Larvell UI, and let's say it's version 2.2. And as long as these dependencies are set up, you should be fine for that. And the next file that we are going to be looking at is env file. This is basically the file that set up your environment, the environment for your project on your computer, and specifically for your computer. That should be noted, because we should not really pushing this to any GitHub to any version control such as GitHub or Git, because every computer has a different environment setup. But we should be doing using an env.example file to have some kind of templates in here, and when your teammates or other people see this file, they can modify that a little bit to their environment. And in here I do have my database set up using my SQL. It's in localhost and it's called links development, and I'll show you how the website is like to run that. We need to run this command, and it will produce the link to our local, and this is basically a very simple website for the purpose of demonstration. And this is basically, that's it. Great. Let's look at the folder structure of Larvell. So this is the templates that it's always be. So certain types of files will be in certain types of folder, obviously. So the HTML files are going to be in resources in views, and they are going to have the postfix as play.php. This is the one that we just visit the front page. So these ones are basically HTML files with for Laravel for PHP, and since it's using play template, we can use curly braces instead of doing this script and this, because this is a lot easier or more compact to deal with. And if you want to use some kind of function, you can just use the annotation and the define function that Laravel has. And the thing with Laravel is that you get the variables and the files are very easily accessed across the whole project instead of doing include.php file or include some kind of files. And that is for the HTML files. Let's say the database files are going to be in database, or especially the roots. This one is important, especially the web.php. This is basically the file that defines your basic URL and process that. Let's see in here, it's for the front page. It will get all of the necessary data that we have in here, and it will return a welcome page, which is the exact same name that we have over here, welcome. It doesn't need to have any HTML or play.php postfix in there, just the name of the file, and that is good enough. And that is the template of Laravel. And as you can see, it returns this file. This is this is the basic way to process the request. But when we have, let's say, 100 web pages, it is very messy and very hard to manage it. And we probably will have a lot of duplicates codes in here, and we don't really want that. That is why we do have the model view control in place in here, and which is this one. Well, you can see that from it not having the function defined in here, and from the annotations over here. This one, every time we go to the home URL, it will use the index function from the class home controller class, which is this one over. Let me show you where it is. It is going to be in the app folder, HTTP and controllers, and here we go. It will return the home HTML file. Let's do that. And this is what it does. One other thing is that sometimes or many times people access URL that are not actually created, they don't exist, so we might want to redirect them to certain other websites. Let's say in here I'll put in the random numbers and also using the model view control, which is over wrong URL. And this can be done for lots of pages, or if not all, as a template. And one thing is that in order to have this one to be able to work, you need to reset the server. There it is. Okay, so this is basically the some little of demonstration on the basic of Laravel that we have. Thank you for watching.
Today I'm going to be talking about Aurelia. Just as a bit of an overview, I'm going to talk about what Aurelia is, what some of its features are, and why you might want or not want to use Aurelia for a project you're building. Aurelia is another in the ever-growing list of front-end JavaScript frameworks. It is open source and similar to React and Angular. Aurelia was created in 2015 by Ron Eisenberg, who later left the Aurelia core team. Since Aurelia is written from the ground up in modern JavaScript, this means that users have native modules and classes available for them to use. Aurelia follows an MVVM architecture, which stands for Model, View, View Model. This architecture keeps view and logic code separated, unlike React, which has both in the same file. With Aurelia, there is no need to specify which controller is for which view model. The file naming convention in Aurelia takes care of that for you. An HTML and JavaScript file that are named the same are automatically paired together. Aurelia doesn't have the concept of a virtual DOM like React, so this means it is easier to integrate external libraries that directly touch the DOM with no workarounds necessary. Moving on to some more of the specific features of Aurelia. One selling point of Aurelia is that it can be used with either vanilla JavaScript or TypeScript, which allows developers to choose based on their preference. Aurelia also has templating and routing built in, unlike React, where you have to use something like React Router to do the routing. Aurelia also has its own official command line interface that can be installed using npm, and then it acts very similar to npm or yarn when building and running a project. Another interesting feature of Aurelia is the inclusion of two-way data binding right out of the package. So two-way data binding means that when you make a change in the model, the UI gets updated, and vice versa. You can see this example clip embedded here, which shows how the text entered into a form is rendered in real time in another location on the page. So you can have two-way data binding or one-way in Aurelia, and the concept of two-way data binding doesn't even exist in React, so having it done for you is a lot simpler than having to try and write some janky JavaScript to do that for you. So here you can see the simple code in the HTML file for the example shown in the previous video. All that is required to bind an input field is the value.bind, and then in the h3 tags you can see that we are displaying the MyData that was bound to the input. The next cool feature of Aurelia is something called dependency injection. So dependency injection is basically letting an injector create dependent objects for you instead of the programmer having to do it. So here we have an example class called customer, which requires a person object. So instead of the customer class having to instantiate a person object itself by doing something like person equals new person, using the inject keyword tells Aurelia it must first obtain an instance of a person object, which it can then inject into the constructor of the customer object. So Aurelia does have some security built in, but it's not known for its security features. It has automatic protection for cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery and clickjacking can be prevented by using things that Aurelia provides to developers. So why should you use Aurelia? For one thing, Aurelia is super quick and easy to both learn and get projects up and running. It is easy to pick up if you are already familiar with JavaScript or TypeScript. And Aurelia is modular, so this means you only need to include dependencies in your project that you actually need, and each component you use or create can be swapped and changed without having to propagate many changes throughout your code. So Aurelia is also flexible. As mentioned earlier, it can be used with either JavaScript or TypeScript, and also many third-party libraries. So here's an example of how quick and easy it is to start up a new Aurelia project. All you have to do is install Node.js, which I'm sure most of us already have. install the Aurelia command line interface using npm, and then you can create a new Aurelia project with all the boilerplate files and directories set up for you, and finally run the project right from your terminal. So Aurelia is definitely not as popular as from frameworks like React and Angular, but one source said that it was among the top 10 best JavaScript frameworks. Aurelia also has pretty nice documentation. They have lots of tutorials, different guides for different concepts in Aurelia, such as binding and templating, routing. They also have their own kind of Stack Overflow with different forums from community members. And then they also have some training sections with books and videos from certified developers. Now, what are some of the downfalls of Aurelia? As I mentioned, since it is not very popular, this means the community is pretty small. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad framework. Because of this small community, there are also less plugins available for developers. So you may have to end up writing more code yourself, but since Aurelia is so simple, it is easy to do. Now again, since Aurelia isn't very popular, this means that there is not a high demand for Aurelia developers in the job market. But who knows, in a few years there might be. Overall, if you're looking to build a modular application very quickly, Aurelia might be a good choice for you. But if you are looking for something with a lot of state management, React is probably a better option. So here I'm just going to show a simple demo site. So this site is basically a business card preview where you can enter your information into the form and it renders in real time. So as you can see, if we type in a first name, it shows up on the business card down below. So looking at the code, you can see that we have a similar directory structure to a React or a Vue project with your source folder and your other files for setup. And then you can see here we only have basically 4 main files that we're using. So this is the main app template file. And you can see at the top that we're requiring a CSS file and a module called the name form. And then down here you can see that this is where we actually instantiate an instance of that name form object. So looking in the app.js file, it's pretty simple. It's basically just an empty class. And then in the name form, this is kind of where the meat of the project is. So you can see that we're also requiring the CSS file. And then we have a bunch of input elements for first name, last name, etc. And you can see we're using the value.bind to bind each of those input fields to the variables that we're displaying on our fake business card. And then again, in the JS file for the name form, you can see we have a constructor. So back to the app, if we fill out all of the fields, you can see that they kind of render how we place the variables and with different styling, which is specified in the CSS file. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you learned something new today.
Hello, we are Group 9 and today we'll be presenting on Grails. First, an overview of the presentation. We'll start off with explaining what Grails is, and then move on to pros and cons of Grails, then move on to a quick demo, show some interesting features about Grails that we found, and then finally move on to why you should or should not use Grails. So, what is Grails? Well, Grails is an open source web application framework for the JVM that uses the Groovy programming language. Grails was initially inspired by Ruby on Rails for its convention over configuration approach towards programming. So, Grails is built on top of Spring Boot, and from Spring Boot it takes the basic control logic the data binding, the runtime configuration, and the transactions. The benefit to being built on top of a already robust framework is that we're able to retain many of the features that Spring offers, such as the amazing security that Spring has. So on top of all of this, Grails adds features such as GORM, a object relational mapper, profiles, which can help encapsulate the project commands and templates and plugins, and other features.
So the advantages of using Grail is that you're using Groovy as your programming language, which is a Java syntax compatible object-oriented programming language, which is both static and dynamic, with features very similar to Python. So Groovy has a very small learning curve, but for people who are already experienced in Java. So some improvements that Groovy has over Java is that it offers flexible syntax, such as operator overloading, which allows for operators to have different implementations based on their arguments, which allows for notation to be closer to their target domain. Another thing is that it offers optional typing, which is the ability to leave out type definitions when defining objects. However, they are implicitly assigned at runtime. Another thing is metaprogramming, which allows for classes to be enhanced by extra methods and properties. So metaprogramming is allowing computer programs to have the ability to treat other programs as their data. So you can now design them to read, generate, analyze, or transform other programs and or itself while running. Groovy also allows for fewer lines of code, which means less maintenance and higher developer productivity. This is because Groovy uses a more concise and dry principle. So dry principle is don't repeat yourself, which is aimed at reducing repetition of software patterns by replacing it with abstractions or using data normalization to avoid redundancy. So Grails has access to GORM, which is Grails Object Relational Mapper. This just provides a large number of APIs for accessing relational data. This is an easy-to-use layer over many other relational databases such as Cassandra, Hibernate, and Neo4j. So traditional web development in Java involves configuring your environments and frameworks at the start and during development. So adding or changing functionality within your application that uses XML files adds an extra step to the change process, which slows down productivity and may diminish the agility of the entire process. So Grails eliminates the need for XML configuration files. It just completely removes the need to add or maintain these such files. There's also now no need to write boilerplate code, which are sections of code that are repeated in multiple places with little to no variation. So normally this happens when you're using languages that are considered verbose. The programmer must write a lot of code to accomplish only minor functionality. So with Grails, if you're writing a class that ends with controller, it's now considered automatically a web controller. So it eliminates that process in between. Finally, plugins for Grails can either be created or accessed to extend and enhance the framework. So Grails' built-in plugin system can be easily used to install plugins when needed. Due to its long time standing, it has a very large plugin community that offers a very wide variety of plugins. So integration with other JVM languages, because it uses a Java development kit, makes it compatible with a large number of Java libraries.
The disadvantages of Grails. Grails is beginner unfriendly if you are not familiar with Java or Spring Boot. It's JVM-centric, and there are definitely easier frameworks to pick up. The setup process for the environment is difficult as you have to manually extract and set up environment variables. Grails has many bugs. Whenever it gets an update, there is a chance of old bugs reappearing. The documentation for Grails is quite old. Most tutorials you'll find are outdated and for older versions 3 and 4. Grails is currently on version 5. Recently, Grails version 3 was deprecated. Grails also lacks adequate IDE support. Most IDEs have insufficient Grails support or none at all. Grails is also not widely used in the industry, unlike frameworks like Express and Django.
Hi, my name is Matt Fung, and I'll be doing the demo on behalf of Group 9. for Grails. So the demo will be divided into two parts. So the first part is to make a Grails CRUD app, and the second part will just be a more detailed version of a Grails CRUD app. So let's get started. Okay, so here is the directory that we're going to work with. So to get started, what we're going to do is do Grails create app. We're going to call it com.app.demo. So what this does is that it will create the basic template that we're going to use. So it's now in the subdirectory demo. So let's go into there and get it into a editor. Okay, so as we can see here, this is the CRUD app that was generated for us right here. This is Grails. So let's get it running first. So what we do is Grails run app. So this will build the app and run it on our local host. So we can see it is successful. It's building. So we're just going to wait a second. Okay, so now it's on localhost 8080 and it should be here. Yeah, there we go. So now the next step is to create the CRUD app. So what we can do is we can make a basic fruits app where there's like a list of fruits you can update, create, edit, delete, and so on. So what we can do is first create that class. So we do Grails create domain class. We're going to call it com.app.fruits. So this will generate that file for us. So as we can see now, it'll be in domain right here. So we can define some fields for it. So we can do string fruit. Well, we can just do name. We can call it like string a color, and we can also give it like a number of fruits. So let's say int count. We can add some constraints to this. So then we can do name nullable, meaning it can't be blank. It can't be empty. So nullable is false, blank is false. So you must fill in an input for it, and then you can also set to unique is true. So then the name has to be unique. Color, same thing, false, blank, false, but it doesn't have to be unique because some fruits have the same color. And then count, we can do also nullable, false, blank, false, and then we can set the minimum value to be 0, like this. Now we can generate the rest of the application in order to get a basic CRUD app working for this. So we can do Grails generate all com.app.fruits. So what this does, well, it will generate the controller for the URL mapping, for the routes. It'll generate the views, like how it looks on the browser, and also generate the services. So that's like the API. So we can see it's done now. So we can do Grails run app to see the changes on the server, on the client, I mean, sorry. And let's see how it looks. So if I reload this, I should see a controller for fruits. Yeah. So now we can create a fruit right here. Let's call it an apple. We can say it's red. Let's say we have 2 apples. So now you have your first apple. You can create another one called peach. Let's say it's orange, and let's say we have 6. So as we can see, you can create fruits, you can view fruits. So this is retrieving the fruits, right? So then the other functions we have is edit. So we can change this to grape. Let's call this purple. Say this is 7. So now we have a grape instead of an apple, and we can also delete this. I delete a peach, so we only have a grape now. So this is like the basic CRUD app that we can make using Grails, and that was really fast, as you can see, because we did the first command, which was to create the app, and then we ran create domain class to create the class for the actual CRUD app, and then we did generate all, which did everything else. So that's really fast. So in order to show a more detailed version of this, we can go to here. So this example here is a student management system. So let's say you have a school and then you want to keep track of the list of students and then the classrooms that they are in. So this is what this app right here will handle that. So we can run this app by doing Grails run app. So it's the same thing. And then we can go to the browser to see how it looks. Okay, so let's go back to here. Just wait for it to load. Alright, so in this example, there's a login page. So you can log in. Let's say you are the principal. Okay, say principal. Okay, so now that you have an account, you can log in. Principal. And log in. So here you go. You have a empty system right now, but you can create a classroom. So let's call it class 01. Say Mrs. Burns is a teacher. 25. Right here it will tell you that the minimum, you have to enter a number, but then you must have at least 10 students. And then the classroom number, let's call it 22. Let's create this class. Let's also create another class called class 002. And the teacher is Mr. Peterson. Have 26 kids, and also classroom 55. Let's create this. So now, as you can see, we have 2 classes, but no students yet. That's fine. We can add some students by doing this. Add student. Let's call him John Doe. Make him 6 years old. ID of 33333, and then student grade is grade 1. And you can select the class that he wants to be in. Let's say class 1, and create another student and do Jane Smith. And make her 7 years old, and then student ID is, let's say, 777, and she's in grade 2. It's like class 2. So as you can see, we now have 2 students. They belong to different classes. Go classrooms, and you can see how for class 1 there's John Doe, class 2 there's Jane Smith. So that's great. So this is like what the principal will want to do. But let's say you're not the principal, you're a teacher, but like you're not able to edit the classes because you're only a teacher, but you want to see the kids, right? So we have another role here as a user. So let's say you're a teacher. Let's make an account for teacher. So if I log in as a teacher, I will be able to see the classrooms. I will be able to see students, right? So I can see the students. I can see John Doe, Jane Smith. I go home, I can see classrooms, class 1, class 2, but I cannot add a new classroom. It's not authorized. Can't edit it, not authorized. And you can't delete it because you're not authorized. So that's it. So this is like a more detailed application of a basic CRUD app using Grails. So that's it.
Now moving on to some interesting things about Grails. We were really surprised at how fast we could get an up and running CRUD application as shown in the demo, especially how you could generate a completely working application just by using a few commands. Also, another interesting thing we found about Grails is that you could write descriptive methods that define the behavior of a database query, and it would function, even if it was never defined previously, as shown in the example below. So, moving on to why you would use Grails. Well, Grails is a powerful framework to pick up if you are familiar with Spring and Java, as it offers most of Spring's utilities and more on top. However, if you are unfamiliar with the underlying frameworks that create Grails, then you may find it easier and faster to pick up another framework to use. That is it for our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Great presentations. I assume I haven't actually watched this last week's worth yet, but I assume they've gone well. One thing I will say, I mean, y'all need better microphones. My skills as an audio engineer are pretty questionable, but yeah, invest in a little microphone technology, interviews online and stuff. It'll be worth it. But see you next week.